Racist officer laughs at a black man's accent, making fun of him with a smug look on his face. "Where are you from?" "You sound so different," the officer mocks, his tone full of arrogance and disrespect. The black man, standing tall, doesn't react with anger. He stays calm, but there's a quiet strength in his eyes. He's used to dealing with this kind of behavior, but today is different. He's not about to let the officer's mockery break his composure. Around them, people start gathering, some quietly taking out their phones to record what's happening, but most of the onlookers stay quiet, avoiding any confrontation. The officer doesn't notice them. He's too busy laughing at what he thinks is an easy target. "Why do you talk like that?" the officer continues. "Are you even from here?" His voice drips with superiority, dismissing the man because of his accent and assuming he's less than everyone else around him. But the black man remains calm. He responds quietly, "I speak the way I speak." That's all. He doesn't let the officer's insults get to him. The officer, thinking he's winning, laughs louder, thinking he has power over the man. But something isn't right. There's a change in the air, though no one speaks up yet. The officer doesn't notice. What happens when a police officer mocks the wrong person? You won't believe who this man really is, and how his identity changes everything. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. The officer's mocking continued, as the black man stood quietly, his posture strong and confident. The black man, despite his calm demeanor, carried an air of quiet strength that many didn't notice right away. He wasn't easily rattled, even by the officer's belittling words. He was a well-spoken, accomplished individual, someone who had faced many challenges in life, but always pressed forward. Whether it was battling adversity or pushing through obstacles that many could never imagine, he had always found a way to succeed. Yet, on the surface, he didn't seek attention. He wasn't one to boast about his accomplishments or make people notice his achievements. Instead, he simply went about his business, living humbly and doing what was required of him. But little did the officer know. This man was not someone to be underestimated. The officer, on the other hand, believed he was the one in control. He was quick to judge people based on how they looked or how they spoke. His arrogance was matched only by his ignorance. He believed that his uniform gave him the right to belittle others, especially those he saw as different or lesser than himself. He assumed that the black man standing before him was just another person to belittle, someone who wasn't worthy of respect. With his hand resting casually on his belt, he seemed certain of his position, and he enjoyed the power it gave him. His smug expression made it clear. He was used to getting away with treating people however he liked. What the officer didn't know was that today he was dealing with someone who wouldn't be intimidated, a man who had earned his place in life with integrity and strength, and was about to teach him a lesson he wouldn't forget. The officer spots the black man from a distance. Immediately, he notices his strong accent and assumes that this man is just another ordinary citizen, someone who doesn't matter, someone he can push around without consequence. The officer, full of his own self-importance, decides to approach the man, ready to make a mockery of him. As he walks up to the man, the officer smirks, clearly thinking this will be just another easy opportunity to assert his authority. "Hey, where are you from?" the officer asks with a laugh. "You sound like you've just stepped off a boat. What kind of accent is that? You sure you belong around here?" The black man remains calm, standing still, trying not to escalate the situation. He knows that the officer is just trying to provoke him, but he refuses to give in. "I'm just going about my business," he replies quietly. hoping the officer will realize he isn't looking for trouble. But the officer isn't interested in listening. Instead, he mocks the man's accent further, laughing derisively. "Oh, I get it now," the officer says. "You probably don't even understand what I'm saying. It's people like you that make this city harder to live in." His voice is dripping with scorn, and he gestures dismissively toward the man as though he's a problem, something to be discarded. The black man, who has lived through far worse than this, maintains his composure. "Officer, I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not here to cause trouble. I've done nothing wrong. Please let me go on my way." But the officer's dismissal grows even worse. He steps closer, completely ignoring the man's attempts to defuse the situation. "You think you can just walk around here with your accent and your attitude, huh? You think you can just talk like that and nobody will question you? You don't even belong here," he sneers. "What's your worth? What could a guy like you even do?" The officer's words grow more aggressive. He raises his voice, assuming the man is beneath him. The black man is visibly frustrated but still refuses to react with anger. He knows that the situation could quickly spiral out of control if he lets his emotions take over. "I said, I'm not causing any trouble," the black man repeats, trying to remain firm. "Please, just let me go." But the officer won't let up. The black man can see that the officer is determined to continue this confrontation, no matter how much he tries to reason with him. The officer's behavior continues to escalate, his voice rising with each word, as he mocks the man's accent and calls into question his entire existence in the community. The situation has become clear to the black man. This officer doesn't see him as a person. He's just a target for the officer's misplaced judgment and prejudice. The officer believes that because the man doesn't speak like him or look like him, he is somehow inferior. The black man knows that this is a dangerous situation, but he remains calm, knowing that the officer's actions are about to have consequences. The officer's voice continues to rise, clearly feeding off his own anger and self-righteousness. "You really don't get it, do you?" he sneers, now standing even closer to the black man, his breath hot on his face. "You talk like you're one of us, but we both know you're nothing like me. People like you should know their place." His words drip with disdain, each one meant to dig deeper and make the black man feel small. The black man stands tall, though his fists are clenched at his sides, but his posture is resolute. He refuses to let the officer's words break him. "I'm not here to argue," he responds calmly, his voice steady, despite the officer's insults. "I'm just trying to live my life, just like anyone else. I'm not looking for trouble," but the officer isn't having any of it. His face reddens, and his hands twitch with frustration. "Oh, you think you're better than this, huh?" he scoffs, taking another step closer, pointing a finger at the man's chest. "You think you can just walk around here acting like you're some kind of big shot?" The officer's behavior intensifies as he continues to belittle the black man's accent, clearly making a mockery of it. "What's with that accent? Are you really trying to play it off like you're educated?" His tone is thick with condescension, every word more spiteful than the last. "You must be some kind of fool if you think anyone's going to take you seriously." The officer's laughter is harsh, almost cruel, and it echoes in the tense air between them. Around them, the crowd of onlookers grows, drawn in by the escalating tension. Some of them pull out their phones, silently recording the interaction, while others watch from a distance, unsure whether to get involved. The atmosphere is thick with discomfort, but no one steps in to stop the officer. The fear of intervening, especially when it comes to the police, holds them back, and the crowd remains silent, waiting to see what will happen next. Despite the officer's taunts, the black man maintains his composure, but it's clear that the situation is taking its toll on him. The officer's words cut deeper with every insult, and yet he does not show weakness. "I'm not here to argue with you," the man replies once again, his voice unwavering. "But you don't have the right to treat me like this, not because of where I come from, not because of my accent, and not because of my skin color." The officer sneers, clearly enjoying the power he feels in the moment. "Oh, I have every right. You're nothing but trouble," he spits. His tone is sharp, each word meant to belittle the black man even more. "You're a nobody in this town, just another person who doesn't belong here." The man's frustration is evident, but he holds it in check. He knows if he lets the officer provoke him, it will only escalate things further. The officer continues to mock him, ignoring the man's attempts to keep calm, and the crowd begins to murmur amongst themselves, unsure how this will end. Some of them look nervously at one another, others simply watch. But all are aware that this situation is spiraling into something far more serious than anyone anticipated. At this point, the officer is so wrapped up in his own disdain that he fails to see the bigger picture. He's no longer questioning the black man. He's insulting him, belittling him, and trying to force him into a corner. The officer doesn't even pause to consider that his actions could have consequences. He's convinced that his uniform gives him all the power he needs, and he continues to make snide remarks, making sure to put the man in his place. Meanwhile, the black man's calm demeanor continues to stand in stark contrast to the officer's growing aggression. He knows that there's something more important at play here than his own feelings. This moment is bigger than both of them. It's about what happens when power is abused, and what can happen when people are not willing to take a stand against that abuse. As the tension builds to a boiling point, the bystanders seem to collectively hold their breath, wondering when someone will step in, but feeling too powerless to do so. Some of the phones keep recording, but others fall silent, as if waiting for the situation to settle. The officer's taunts grow louder, and the black man is faced with a difficult choice. Should he continue to stand his ground, or should he walk away before things get out of hand? And yet, the black man remains firm, his posture unyielding. It's not just about his own dignity anymore. It's about showing everyone around him that standing up against disrespect and discrimination is more important than backing down. This moment, as painful as it is, has now become about standing tall in the face of injustice and not allowing the officer's bigotry to go unchallenged. The black man stands tall, his composure unwavering despite the officer's insults. The officer, still not recognizing the magnitude of his actions, steps closer, continuing his tirade. His words are laced with arrogance as he leans in, still making mockery of the black man's accent, questioning his intelligence and worth. The tension in the air is thick as the crowd watches, some recording, others too afraid to speak up. But then, in a calm voice, the black man interrupts. "I think it's time you know who you're talking to." The words hang in the air for a moment, catching the officer off guard. The officer stops in his tracks, his mouth still open, ready to spew another insult. But the black man's presence seems to freeze him in place. "I'm not just some regular citizen," the black man continues, his tone measured and firm. "I'm the newly elected governor of this state." The officer blinks, the mocking smirk fading from his face as he processes the statement. For a split second, he stands there, speechless, unable to comprehend what he's just heard. His eyes widen as the realization hits him, but he doesn't speak. He stares, unsure how to react to the situation unfolding before him. The black man stands steady, his voice still calm, but now tinged with authority. "And you," he says, looking directly into the officer's eyes, "are going to answer for your behavior. I am your new boss." The words carry weight. The officer stumbles back, his smug expression now replaced by one of confusion and fear. The officer's face shifts from disbelief to panic as he begins to stutter, fumbling for something to say. I didn't know. I didn't—" His voice trails off, unable to form a coherent thought. The crowd, which had been silently observing, now watches in awe as the officer's mistake becomes apparent. The black man, standing as the embodiment of calm authority, watches the officer struggle to find his footing. The officer's previous bravado evaporates, leaving him vulnerable and exposed, realizing how terribly wrong he's been. The black man does not raise his voice, but there is a quiet power in his demeanor that has clearly shaken the officer to his core. As the officer stammers, trying to apologize but failing miserably, the black man speaks again, his voice unwavering. "You should have treated me with respect from the beginning. This is unacceptable. You don't get to mock someone because of how they speak or where they come from." The officer looks around at the gathered crowd, his face pale as the weight of his mistake sinks in. His confidence is gone, replaced by the stark realization that he has just embarrassed himself in front of a crowd, and worse, in front of someone far more powerful than he could have imagined. The black man turns away, his expression neutral but firm, signaling that the conversation is over. As he walks away, the officer is left standing there, speechless, his previous aggression now completely deflated. The crowd watches, some in silence, others murmuring about the officer's swift downfall. The black man's calm, collected response to the officer's condescension has turned the tide. The officer, once in control, is now reduced to a flustered figure, desperately trying to salvage what little dignity he has left. But it's clear that the damage is done, and the black man has the last word. The officer, still in a state of disbelief, stands there, his hands trembling slightly as he tries to grasp the full magnitude of the situation. I didn't know," he mutters, his voice a mix of panic and regret. "I didn't mean any disrespect. Please, I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't thinking." His apology is rushed, the words tumbling out without the confidence they once had, now laced with a sense of fear that wasn't there before. The black man, however, stands still, unbothered by the officer's frantic words. His posture remains calm and unwavering, exuding the kind of dignity that commands respect. His face, though stern, reveals no hint of anger or hostility. Instead, there's an overwhelming air of quiet authority. "I don't want your apology," the black man responds, his tone clear, strong, and unyielding. "What you did was wrong. It's not something you can just brush off with a few words. You mocked me. You judged me because of the way I speak, the way I look, like I'm somehow less than you because you thought I had no power." His words are steady and powerful, each one a reminder of the officer's mistake and the deep-rooted prejudice that fueled it. The officer, still reeling from the revelation, tries again, his voice cracking. "I never meant it like that. I didn't know. I was just doing my job." But this time, his words sound weak and insincere, the confidence he had moments ago completely gone. "You were doing your job." The black man's voice rises ever so slightly, but it's enough to grab the attention of those still standing around. "Your job is to serve and protect, not belittle and judge. You're supposed to be upholding the law, not abusing your power over someone because of your assumptions." The officer doesn't have an answer. He stands there, completely frozen, unsure of how to fix the damage he's caused. The black man doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His calm demeanor is more intimidating than any shouting or physical action could ever be. What you did was a violation of respect, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been judged unfairly, simply for being different. For you, it was just another thing to mock, but for me, it's a matter of dignity and self-worth. You don't get to take that away from anyone. The officer, visibly shaken, opens his mouth to say something, but nothing comes out. He stares at the black man, now realizing that this is not just a simple misunderstanding. He's made a grave error, one that could have serious consequences. Please, I didn't mean to. The black man doesn't give him the chance to finish. He stands up straighter, his eyes locking with the officer's, and speaks one final time. You've learned today that no one is above being held accountable. Not even you. There is no anger in his voice, no sense of vengeance, just a simple, undeniable truth. The officer, now fully aware of who he's been dealing with, stands in stunned silence. His chest heaves as if he's trying to find the words to make up for what he's done, but no words come. The crowd, which had once been passive observers, now sees the officer in a completely different light. They've watched the officer mock, belittle, and now stand in complete silence before a man who has proven that power and authority come with accountability. The black man's dignity is undeniable, and it's clear that his sense of self-respect is unshaken by the officer's actions. He turns his back on the officer, walking away slowly but purposefully. His actions speak louder than any words could. The officer watches him go, his face flushed with embarrassment and shame. His pride has been shattered in front of everyone. As the black man walks away, he doesn't need to say anything else. His message is clear. No matter who you are or what authority you have, treating others with respect is not optional. It's essential. He leaves the officer and the crowd behind, the weight of the lesson now fully realized. The officer, now standing alone in the crowd, is left to confront the magnitude of his mistake. There's no going back from this. His pride is crushed, and the knowledge that he was wrong is something he will carry with him long after the encounter ends. The man he mocked wasn't just another ordinary citizen, but someone who commands respect and has earned it in ways the officer can never understand. The officer stands there for a moment, completely humbled, the silence around him serving as a reminder of the power of dignity and the consequences of abuse. The moment the video of the incident between the officer and the black man went viral, it ignited a wildfire of reactions from every corner of the country. It didn't take long for major news outlets to pick up on the story, with widespread coverage that captured public attention. Social media platforms exploded, with users sharing the clip and hundreds of thousands of people expressing their outrage at the officer's disrespectful behavior toward the man. The video revealed the officer mocking the black man's accent and belittling his worth without cause or justification, and it struck a chord with so many people who had seen this kind of prejudice play out too often. Within hours, hashtags like #Justice for Respect, #End Racial Profiling, and #No More Bias began trending, and the issue went beyond just one instance of police misconduct. It became a symbol of something much larger, the continued struggles of marginalized communities, especially black people, who often face prejudice from those who are supposed to protect them. The conversation turned to the broader implications of systemic racial bias, highlighting how prejudice often manifests in law enforcement practices and undermines public trust in police officers. In the midst of the outrage, the man who had been mocked, now revealed as the newly elected governor, took charge of the situation. His identity and role as a leader of the state gave his voice even more power. With his public platform, he made a statement about the incident, calling for greater accountability from law enforcement and emphasizing the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, no matter their race, background, or appearance. In his speech, the governor spoke candidly about the harmful effects of racial profiling. He pointed out how actions like the officers are not just one-time offenses, but are part of a larger, pervasive issue that harms communities. He addressed the systemic bias in policing that allows such behavior to continue unchecked, stating that it perpetuates a cycle of mistrust and fear between citizens and law enforcement. The governor's words resonated deeply, as they came from someone who had not only experienced racism firsthand, but was now in a position to influence change at the highest levels of government. The media attention on the incident did not stop at the governor's statement. It grew into a nationwide discussion about the need for police reform. Advocacy groups, civil rights organizations, and concerned citizens rallied behind the governor's call for reform, sharing his message of fairness and equality. On social media, people from all walks of life began to demand real change, calling for more effective training in police departments to combat implicit bias, the introduction of better community policing practices, and the creation of laws that would ensure police officers are held accountable for their actions. For days, the conversation didn't just focus on the officers' behavior, but expanded into discussions about reforming the very structure of policing in the United States. Citizens from around the country expressed their support for the governor, pledging to back his push for more inclusive and transparent policing practices. The incident had sparked a movement, one that called for the protection of marginalized communities and the promotion of justice for all people, regardless of their race or social standing. The governor, fully aware of the responsibility and power that his position afforded him, used his newfound influence to spearhead efforts aimed at reform. He introduced a series of proposals that would require police departments to undergo extensive cultural sensitivity training, stress the importance of community engagement, and implement measures to ensure that no officer's behavior would go unchecked. As part of his proposed initiatives, he also advocated for the establishment of independent review boards that would hold officers accountable for any misconduct, making sure that communities would have a voice in the process. The story quickly turned from a local incident to a powerful symbol of resistance against injustice. What had started as an act of humiliation by a single officer had transformed into a powerful campaign for change. The black man, now governor, became an emblem of hope, proving that even in the face of adversity, individuals have the power to make a difference. His bravery in using his platform to speak out and his push for real change inspired countless people, encouraging them to take action and fight for justice. Across the country, cities began discussing the need for similar reforms, and the story of the governor's resolve became a rallying cry for those who had been disenfranchised for far too long. What had started as a simple act of mocking a person's accent had spiraled into a national conversation about respect, fairness, and the importance of making the police accountable to the very people they are meant to serve. The story, though painful, led to a greater awareness of the issues of racial discrimination, and the push for reform took on a life of its own. The black man, who had been mocked and belittled, emerged as a beacon of change, using his position to ensure that those who serve the public are held to the highest standards of respect and integrity. The incident with the officer mocking the black man's accent ultimately turned into a lesson that resonated far beyond that single moment. As the story spread, It became clear that no matter who you are, whether a humble citizen or someone in a powerful position, you deserve respect. It didn't matter what your background is, where you come from, or what you look like. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity, and the officer's actions were a harsh reminder of how easily people in power can forget this fundamental truth. The key takeaway from this entire episode was about accountability. Those in positions of authority, whether they wear a badge, sit in an office, or hold political power, must be held responsible for their actions. No one should be exempt from the expectation of treating others with respect. The officer in this story believed that because of his authority, he had the right to demean and belittle others. However, he quickly learned that no matter his position, he was not above being accountable for his actions. In addition to the importance of accountability, this story also highlights the significance of standing up for what is right, especially when you are faced with a person or system of authority that might try to intimidate or suppress you. The black man, who remained calm throughout the interaction, did not let the officer's behavior slide. He stood his ground, showing the courage to face the challenge head-on, despite the officer's aggression. His action of not backing down helped change the course of the situation, demonstrating how one individual's courage can spark wider change. The story ultimately underscores the powerful impact of standing up for what is right, especially when the odds seem stacked against you. The governor's response to the officer, backed by his position, and the subsequent advocacy for reform, sparked nationwide discussions about justice, equality, and the need to create a society where all people, regardless of their status or background, are treated fairly. The lesson is crystal clear. Respect for every individual is a fundamental right, and it's everyone's responsibility to ensure that fairness and dignity are upheld in all situations. In standing up against injustice, even in the face of authority, we create the potential for real change that can impact entire communities and societies.